Ever get the feeling that some places, well, some places just feel like they were built for a reason? Like every corner, every street, it's all part of a bigger plan.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, you can kind of sense a purpose behind the design, right?
Exactly. And today, we're going deep, really deep, into a place that embodies that. Chandigarh. Now, I know what you're thinking. Another modern Indian city. But trust me, this one, this one is different. It's got layers, a story that goes back thousands of years. We're talking ancient roots and then, boom, cutting-edge design.
Yeah, you don't often see that kind of mix. Like, how do you even go from ancient settlements to a planned city? It's pretty wild.
It is. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We've got some amazing sources here, timelines, archaeological reports, the works, and we're going to pull out all the juicy bits, all the interesting stuff about Chandigarh's past, ready to jump in.
Let's do it. I'm ready to have my mind blown.
All right, so buckle up. We're going way back, way before the modern city, before the buildings and the streets. We're talking about the Harappan civilization.
No way, Harappan. Like the Indus Valley people.
The one and only. Around 2500 BCE, give or take. They were here, right where Chandigarh stands today. Can you believe that? Underneath all that planning and modern architecture are traces of one of the world's oldest urban cultures. It's mind-blowing.
So, what are we talking? Like ruins? Temples? What did they find?
Well, there were settlements discovered in places like Barail and Kishungar. They found tools, pottery, all those telltale signs of a pretty advanced society, even back then. It makes you wonder, right? What was it like to live there?
Seriously, I mean, we're talking about urban planning way before anyone else was doing that kind of thing.
Right. And get this. The region even pops up in the Mahabharata, that epic Indian story, as part of the legendary Kurukshetra. So during the Vedic period, which was roughly 1500 to 500 BCE, this wasn't just empty land. There were villages, communities, people living their lives, totally different from what we see today, but still a human presence.
It's crazy how history is like layered on top of itself.
It really is. So we've got these ancient roots, and then things start to get even more interesting. Enter the Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya, the big guy himself.
Okay, yeah, I remember learning about him. Big empire, right?
Huge. And in the 4th century BCE, they were here too, leaving their mark. They brought trade, even early Buddhist influences. It's like each era is adding its own flavor to the mix.
I'm starting to see how this place became such a melting pot of cultures. But was it like a major city back then?
Good question. Not quite a metropolis, but definitely connected to those larger empires. And speaking of empires, let's not forget the Guptas. They came a bit later, from the 4th to the 6th century CE. Our sources mention their impact on, well, everything. Art, culture, education, the whole 9 yards. They really left their mark on North India.
So even though Chandigarh wasn't their capital or anything, it was still soaking up all these cultural influences then.
Exactly. It's like it was constantly evolving, absorbing ideas from all these powerful empires. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. But what happened next? Did it keep growing into a major city?
Well, that's where things take an interesting turn. We're going to fast forward a bit now through the medieval period and into the time of the Mughals. And get this. Chandigarh kind of fades into the background. It was still a settlement, sure, but nothing major. It was under the control of various powers, the Rajputs, the Mughals, and later the Sikhs. But it never really became a big deal during that whole time.
So hold on. We go from all this ancient stuff, empires rising and falling, to basically a quiet little town.
You got it. Quiet and unassuming, which is kind of hard to imagine given what it becomes later on, right?
Yeah.
Even the Mughals, they set up some administrative outposts. But Chandigarh itself stayed relatively small.
And I'm guessing it stayed that way during British rule?
You know it. The British took over in 1849, but Chandigarh was still mostly rural. Ambala was the important center, and Lahore, well, Lahore was the capital of Punjab back then. Chandigarh was just there.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, is a key part of the story.
How so?
Because it sets the stage for the most dramatic transformation of all.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. This is where things get really interesting, right?
You bet. We're talking independence, partition, the birth of a new India. And suddenly, everything changes. It's 1947. Punjab is split. Lahore, gone. Part of Pakistan now. And India. Well, they needed a new capital for their part of Punjab, and guess what? They didn't have one. Not a proper one, anyway.
So they had to start from scratch.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they went all out. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first prime minister of India, he had this vision. He wanted to create a city that would symbolize a new India, a modern India, a city that would showcase progress and innovation.
That's a huge undertaking. I mean, building a capital city from nothing. That's incredibly
It
ambitious.
was. They acquired land from 50 villages. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And they brought in the best minds in architecture and design. Le Corbusier, the famous Swiss-French architect, he was the mastermind behind it all. Albert Mayer and Mosier Nowicki were involved too, but Le Corbusier, he was the big name.
Wow. Le Corbusier, that's a serious choice.
He was all about modernism, clean lines, functionality, a complete break from traditional Indian city planning. It was a bold statement. This is the new India, and we're doing things differently.
So what did that actually look like? I mean, what did they do?
Well, picture this. Wide roads, a grid-like pattern of streets, green spaces everywhere, and buildings with that distinct modernist style. It was India's first planned city. A complete 180 from the organic, sometimes chaotic, growth of older cities.
I can see how that would be appealing. Order, efficiency, a sense of control.
Totally. It was all about creating a city that would work, a city that would be a model for the future. And in many ways it was. Chandigarh became a blueprint for other planned cities in India.
But was it all smooth sailing? I mean, you don't just erase centuries of history and tradition without some pushback, right?
Of course not. There were criticisms, debates about whether this style truly reflected Indian culture, but the vision prevailed, and the city kept evolving.
So what happened after independence? Did it just keep growing?
Oh, it grew all right. But there was another twist coming. 1966, Punjab gets divided again. This time, Haryana and Himachal Pradesh are born. And Chandigarh, well, it became a bit of a hot potato. Both Punjab and Haryana wanted it as their capital.
Oh man, a political tug of war. So what happened?
They came up with a compromise, a uniquely Indian solution. Chandigarh became a union territory, which means it's directly ruled by the central government. It became the shared capital of both states, but not officially part of either.
Interesting. So like a neutral zone.
Exactly. And in a way, that kind of fits with its whole history, right? This place that's been influenced by so many different powers, now standing apart, shared but independent.
It's like it's destined to be a crossroads, a place where different forces meet. So did it thrive as this shared capital?
Absolutely. In the decades that followed, Chandigarh blossomed. It became a center for education, healthcare, IT, you name it. And those strict building regulations they put in place, they really paid off. The city is known for its cleanliness, its greenery, its organization. It's like a breath of fresh air compared to some other Indian cities.
Yeah, you can really see that legacy of planning.
It's everywhere. And then you've got the Rajiv Gandhi IT Park, which made it a tech hub too. So it's not just a pretty face, it's a modern, dynamic city. And get this, it consistently ranks among the best in India for quality of life and cleanliness.
Wow. That's impressive. It really shows that the original vision, the commitment to planning and design, it actually worked.
It did. But let's be honest, a city is not just about buildings and infrastructure, right? It's about the people, the culture, the places that give it its soul. And Chandigarh, it's got that in spades.
Oh, I'm sure. What are some of the must-sees?
Okay, so first up, you've got to check out the rock garden. This is where things get a little quirky. It was created by this guy, Nek Chand, entirely from industrial waste and recycled materials.
What? Seriously? That's amazing.
It is. It's like a whimsical wonderland, all these sculptures and mosaics, a total contrast to the planned precision of the rest of the city.
That sounds awesome.
Then there's Sukna Lake, perfect for a relaxing stroll. And the Rose Garden, get this, Asia's largest, with over 1,600 varieties of roses.
Okay, now that's just showing off.
Right. And of course, you can't miss Sector 17, the bustling heart of the city, all the shops, restaurants, nightlife, it's all there. And finally, Le Corbusier's masterpiece, the Capitol Complex. It houses all the important government buildings, and it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
A UNESCO site. That's a big deal.
It is. It recognizes the architectural significance of the complex and the whole city, really. It's a reminder that Chandigarh is not just a city, it's a symbol.
A symbol of what?
Of a new beginning, of a nation embracing modernity, of the power of human vision and design to shape the future. I mean, think about it. We started with ancient settlements, then a bit of a lull, and then bam! This incredibly ambitious project, born out of the chaos of partition, becomes a thriving, modern city. It's a pretty remarkable story.
It really is, and it leaves you with a lot to think about.
Doesn't it? Like, how does living in a city that was so meticulously planned, so intentionally designed, affect the people who live there? How does it compare to those cities that just kind of grew organically over time? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's a question worth pondering.
Definitely food for thought.
And that, my friend, is what makes history so fascinating. It's not just about dates and facts. It's about the stories, the choices, the consequences that shape the world we live in.
Well said. And Chandigarh is a perfect example of that.
It is. All right, folks, that's our deep dive into the history of Chandigarh. Hope you enjoyed the ride.
I did. And hey, maybe we'll do another deep dive into some other fascinating cities soon.
You know it. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning,